I'm going to at least be referring to a koan that's in the Book of Serenity. It's case 19, Yunmen Sumeru. A monk asked Yunmen, when not producing a single thought, is there any fault or not? Yunmen said, Mount Sumeru. I'll repeat that. A monk asked Yunmen, when not producing a single thought, is there any fault or not? Yunmen said, Mount Sumeru. So this is really a lovely koan, a wonderful koan, and it's bottomless. Sometimes, I'll say sometimes there are koans that just have a certain kernel, a certain essential point, and if you get that point, okay, you've seen that koan. But this one has infinitude to it. It's so beautiful. So my interest in using this koan today arose out of some of my Daishan discussions that I've had recently with some folks. And because, I have a number of people who are working with shikantaza now rather than koans. And I'm finding that to be very powerful. And I'm finding, I think I've mentioned this before, that I'm now seeing a blending of koan study and shikantaza as being a much more powerful path of practice. There's so much we can learn from shikantaza that we don't learn from koans. There's so much we can learn from koans that we don't learn from shikantaza. And so we need both those things, and so those of you that are working with me in Daishan, you're either already experiencing that or will. But one of the things that also happened in the past week is I asked several people how their shikantaza was going, and they said, oh, well, I'm still thinking. Now, one of the benefits that you all have, because I'm teaching remotely, is that I cannot hit you with a stick. Because those people would have been thoroughly whacked. Because this is such an essential point. And it's also, I think, one of the points and one of the places that this koan goes. And so I'll come back to the koan. Zen practice, no matter how long we do it, is not going to stop us from thinking. Thinking is an inherent part of our nature. And if we are blessed, and I say that because so many older folks these days are having problems with cognition. If we are blessed, we will be able to think till the end of our lives. The ability to think is a blessing. And it's not something that we can, should, or will away. Thinking is necessary, right? It's necessary. You can't get out of the bed in the morning without thinking. You can't make breakfast without thinking. In a certain sense, okay? It's necessary. There are questions that come up in our lives that need analysis. It's like the current anti-science thing. No, we need to be able to think. We need to be able to analyze, right? We need to be able to do double-blind studies. They have a place. They have a place in this world, in our lives, and they are important. And furthermore, Zazen is not going to stop us from thinking. So what is it going to do? Hopefully, it's going to loosen our attachment to thought. The problem is not thinking. The problem is being attached to our thoughts. And what Zazen is teaching us is to let go, to open up, to expand our field of awareness, expand our being, not constrain it in a prison of thought, but thought is part of our existence. And we can't and won't eliminate it. Now, that's not to say there are not sometimes states of samadhi and during which we're not thinking, and those are great. And if we could be in that state permanently, we would die of hunger, thirst. We need it. So somebody not too long ago brought up the question, the thing of this cow goes through the latticed window, and why can't the tail go through that koan? And that's what that's pointing to. That tail, that connection to the relative reality is just as essential as our expansive nature. So back to Mount Sumeru. So Mount Sumeru is actually a physical place, right? It is a mountain in the Himalayas, or Mount Meru. And it's a 20,000 foot plus peak. And the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the Jains all consider it the center of both the physical universe and the spiritual universe. And that right there is a clue. Where, this is a question for you all, where is the center of the spiritual universe? Anybody hazard a guess? Brad, is that your response, or you're pointing? You're pointing here, there, and everywhere. Kind of. Is that? Am I seeing that right? Margaret's pointing down.
Right here.
No, I'm pointing to here.
Right here. Yeah, well, that's what I saw it down. It's right here. Yeah. Right.
Wherever here is.
Wherever here is.
I guess not.
At any moment, we are the center of the spiritual universe. The spiritual universe, center of the spiritual universe, is right here. It's not a physical place in, I don't know what country that is, Tibet or Bhutan or India, but it's right here. Always. Right here. So that says something, right? If this here, right now is Mount Sumeru, let's go back to the question here about thought. When not producing a single thought, is there any fault or not? Mount Sumeru is the answer. So it also tells us we are Mount Sumeru. We are intimately connected to Mount Sumeru right here, right now. So when not producing a single thought, is there any fault or not? Let's think about that Mount Sumeru out there. Now, the physical Mount Sumeru. This great, magnificent chunk of rock covered with ice and snow. reaching up in the out into the universe and enduring everything, right? It doesn't, Mount Sumeru doesn't go inside when it snows. When the wind blows, the wind blows. The mountain is exposed to everything. The mountain is living the world. And how does it respond? It responds by being there, just being there. Massive, strong presence. So what does it tell us? What does it tell us? Us little Mount Sumerus. It tells us that we need to be here. Storms come, wind comes, snow comes, sun comes, and here we are. Fully present. So let's go a little deeper into this question of thought. Dogen talked about mountains. Anybody remember what Dogen said about mountains? All you Dogen fans? Yes. Doug, could you repeat that for the audience at home? Dogen talked about the blue mountains walking, right? Is that right? They were blue. I think they were blue. The mountains walking, right? And that too goes right to the heart of this koan. If we are the mountains, if we are Mount Sumeru, we also walk. We also talk. We also think. We also act. So the question is, how do we act as mountains? Or to take another quote from Dogen, first there are mountains and rivers, then there are no mountains and river, then there are mountains and rivers again. And Daido used to say, and those mountains are different. Okay, how are they different? Good, lots of perplexed looks. I love that. Okay.
Because the second mountains are responding. They've been walking, they've been disappearing, and they're not stagnant.
Not stagnant. Yep.
They're alive. They're alive.
Yeah, they are alive, as Dr. Frankenstein said to his assistant. Let's see if I can.
They are now.
What's that?
To quote the Incredible String Band, they are now.
They are now. They are now.
They are us.
They are us.
We are them. We are the walrus.
That sounds like a song also.
There's another quote that comes to mind. Before awakening, no enlightenment. after awakening, no enlightenment.
Well, yeah, yes. So that's everything you're saying is to the point. So how is it different? How is that different before and after? What is that? What is that?
They're imperturbable, even though they're in motion.
Oh, now what does that mean, Gary? You just nailed it. You just nailed it. You just don't know.
I can't express it as a thought. So I just, I think maybe by doing shikantaza long enough, you get there. Excuse me.
The question is, how do we be Mount Sumeru in the relative world? How do we be Mount Sumeru as a thinking being? Right? Because that's it. We need to express Mount Sumeru in every moment. Every moment we are at the center of the spiritual universe. How's that different from the old mountains, the before mountains?
The before mountains are just sort of lost in sort of believing everything that happens that they have to deal with is all there is, in each instant. And the imperturbable mountain sort of sees the whole picture.
Yes, yes.
There's another way to go here for me, and that's in the relationship of the apparent and the real, that perhaps before they're confused.
Can you say it a little more, Brad?
As I see it, the apparent and the real are ongoing. In another way, not different, but how do you tell them apart? But much of my life was spent, maybe still, confusing the apparent for the real. So for me, that's a before.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. I'm going to come back. It's suddenly got very quiet. Can people hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to that image of the mountain, of that Mount Sumeru. That Mount Sumeru doesn't avoid storms, right? It doesn't go hide when the wind blows. It's right out there, reaching up into the sky, right in the midst of the storms, of the blowing winds, howling, raging, whatever it is, the sun beating down. There, Sumeru is right there. And yet, there's a sense in which Sumeru is not transformed and beaten around by those things, right? The mountain simultaneously is wrapped up in change and turmoil and chaos and is unchanging and permanent, which is a description of us, of our nature, of our true nature. So the trick for us is to learn to live in the world in this relative reality. Grounded as the mountain, solid as the mountain, powerful as the mountain. You know, there's a beautiful guided meditation in the or at least it was in the days when I trained in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. There is a mountain meditation. There's a mountain. It's a guided meditation. And the mountain meditation, you know, it consists of sort of, you follow the mountain through the year, the cycle of the year, through the cycle of the seasons, through the cycles of all the different weathers, all the different animals, all the things that are going on. And then periodically, the punchline is, and the mountain sits. And the mountain sits. So does that mean we need to sit all the time? No. It means that we need to find that groundedness, that place that we reach in our sitting, and bring it into all of our lives so that we never cease being the mountain. We never cease being grounded. We never cease sitting, even when we're caught up in all the turmoil of the world. That's taking our practice off the cushions. That's taking our practice into our lives. That's being Mount Sumeru every moment. That's being incredibly solid and incredibly free as we live our lives. So can we think as the mountain? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes I hate this phrase because it's so Buddhist sounding, you know, but it's this idea of, I don't know a better way of saying it, of thinking non-thinking. Of thinking that's not centered in our ego, that's not self-directed or self-reflected, but thinking out of our immediate connection to the world. That's a distinction that's been meaning more and more to me of late. You know, that idea, there's so many of these things that, you know, that we do when that are tangibly different when we filter them through our ego or when we don't. Right? So what the same act can on one hand be compassionate and the other hand be selfish, depending on whether it's arising out of me, mine, I, what I want, or whether it's arising out of my intimacy with the world. Right? It's a very important and tangible difference. Same act, doesn't what may be seen is not different, but in one case, coming from the seat of compassion, coming from the seat of openness, coming from the seat of at-one-ment, or coming from Peter's narrow perspective, Peter's narrow needs, Peter's wants and desires, Peter's fears and hopes. And when we're coming from that first place, we are the mountain. We are the thinkers of non-thinking. And then back to that certain basic thing, and back to Zazen. That's what that letting go does. Initially, we are completely identified with our thoughts. Our thoughts control us and shape us. Right? They dictate our lives to us. And then we learn to let go. We learn to create some distance between ourselves and our thoughts. And then we come back together with our thoughts. Thinking, not thinking. It's hard to talk about and explain, so I hope it's come through in some way that makes sense to you guys.
Peter, through some synchronicity, I have to say that just while sitting today before your talk, I had the Dogen line come up, thinking, non-thinking, and it seemed, I think this is what you were just saying, but I want to make sure that I have it. It seemed like it was coming out of, if you sort of abandon the perspective of just the ego, then there's some kind of activity, the mind is still perceiving things or whatever, but you don't generate the self-centered thoughts. And so it seems like that's what's meant by thinking, non-thinking. I guess a thought could come by, but if you're not, but it's more like floating across you're the blue sky that the thought may sort of float in. You're the whole blue sky, not just whatever the thought is trying to grasp, and being just in that grasping of some specific thing. So it's like, it seems like in think non-thinking, there could be mental activity that's like a thought, but without the ego being what is actually assumed, that what I want is all it is, then it's got a totally different quality. And that's what Dogen meant, that it's not ban all thoughts. It's come from this perspective that's much wider. Is that what you're saying?
George, I think he's got it. Yeah. Back to sort of my friend, the rock climber, that I talk about fairly often. That person that's climbing high above the earth, completely absorbed, because they have to be. If they're not completely absorbed, they're liable to be 50 feet below, dashed on the rock. So they're completely absorbed. but they're not putting their hands and feet in random places. There's not no thought. If there was no thought, they would die immediately. Right? They have to be thinking. Thinking how? They're not filtering it through the ego. If they're filtering it through the ego, they're all bound up, and they, and if you looked at really good, rock climbers, they're fluid, they're moving, it's like a dance up the wall. You can't do that thinking and analyzing. So what's going on? Thinking, non-thinking.
Maybe also paying attention.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the prerequisite. Right? I mean, I think absolutely it's got to be profound attention at any time. And so then again, that applies at any time in our life. That immersion, that intimacy, that, and I don't know why I like intimacy better than non-separation, because to me, intimacy feels
more intimate.
Yeah, exactly. It's more interesting. A little warm. Non-separation sounds clinical. Oh, look at him. He's suffering from profound non-separation. We got to get him to the ER immediately. But intimacy is nice, right? And it conveys, I think, a little more. Anyway, that word. But yes, intimacy all the time.
Well, your rock climber is paying exquisite attention, but he does not have preconceived notions of what's going to happen. He has to be dealing with exactly what is. Absolutely. And this gets somewhat to what Gary was talking about, I think, that we have to be getting the filters that we all have and that we become aware of as we sit and see these filters. We have to be getting these filters out of the way. I'm not sure we ever get them all out of the way all the time, but we can get them out of the way every now and then. And your rock climber certainly did it.
Yes, again, I think you're right on point, Margaret. And it's you're right. I don't think we ever get rid of them altogether. Or at least not. At least I haven't. And but. So it's this continual process. We've got to kind of remove them. We've got to let them go, letting go. And then they come back and we let them go again. And in those times when we're successful at letting go, that's when the intimacy, that's when the universe reveals itself as our very body and mind, right?
I was thinking as you were talking, that this is the beginning of a holiday season that will extend for some weeks with family gatherings that may be in person this year for many people, and getting rid of those filters. There's a man from San Francisco who said, give your family the gift of not knowing them, of coming in without preconceived ideas. And that's a kind of non-thinking, and letting them be whoever they are as they present themselves to you without the attitude of, oh God, she always says that, or he always drinks too much. Just put that out. Get rid of it. Let it go. Non-thinking, paying attention, totally present on an intimate level and an everyday level. Not in the abstract.
Yes, that's beautiful, and it's important. It's in everything. You can't be a psychotherapist unless you can interact with people in that way. I can't bring my stuff into the room, my preconceptions and judgments about a person. I have to be just there for whatever they present. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens when, particularly with families. You know, families are so bound up with the dynamics, the back and forth. You know, I do this and then you do this, and I do this. You know, da da da. And we've been doing this since we've been kids, and you know, and all of a sudden you can take that out of it. It's like, okay, and is that, how does that affect the other person? You know, quantum physics says it absolutely does. So does, you know, systems theory. You know, when I was in grad school, I studied some systems therapy, and I have to admit to not having been very good at it, but some of the faculty where I was, they were amazing at it, you know, and they could see where they were sort of the imbalances, the stuck places, you know, and just twisted a little, and all of a sudden that dynamic was changed and a whole different encounter unfolded, you know. So we have that power, that, you know, to do that at any time. But as long as we're not stuck in our own dynamic, we have to be out. We have to be thinking, not thinking.
I'll just add a quick piece thinking about what Peter and Margaret have been saying and paying attention. Peter knows, some of you later on in Serenity, there's another koan that for me goes here, where the monk asks the teacher, when arising and vanishing go on unceasingly, what then? And that's, you know, as I understand it, the arising and vanishing of thought. And the teacher, Loashan, replies, whose arising and vanishing is it? And I'm finding that in practice, that's a way to actualize, that question is a way to actualize the identifying or not identifying with the arising and vanishing, it's just as a practice discipline.
Yes, that's a nice way to see it. You know, it's like we create it, right? We create it. We create the whole thing. You know, there are no boundaries that exist outside of our minds, right? We create the boundaries. We create the self and other. We create, you know, the struggles. We create so much. And as you're talking about it, as you know, the arising and disappearing. Good. I love it when there's silence. I just figure that means everybody has it or everybody is totally confused. Either one is wonderful. So any final thoughts before we go arise and disappear? Okay. Good.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Before this morning, I thought that you were all hopeless, but I now think there's some small glimmers of hope. Have a good week.
Thank you,
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you all.